one thing I want to like get into that I was reading about is the three different um levels of three different kinds of principal kinds of places in Legend of Zelda. Like in
Okay.
all Legends of Zelda, how you have like um well, I'll just bring it up now. Like you have the it's called like the overland or like the place you are that covers the whole map.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
then
The overworld.
yes, the overworld. The
Yeah.
overworld. And
Hmm.
that's like, when you're in the plains looking out in all directions, right? And
Yeah.
then you have the towns and then the dungeons. And I think that's correct. Like those are the three principal areas.
Yeah, if you narrowed it down to the dynamic that was introduced through Legend of Zelda 2, Link's Adventure. Ever
Hmm.
since then, it's basically been that kind of layout where you've got dungeons or caves and towns and then the overworld.
Hmm.
And that's accurate. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Whereas Legend of Zelda 1 was just overworld caves and dungeons.
yeah,
That's it.
yeah. Okay. Yeah, I just think it's cool how they have those like principle, like just that they have that system set up, and like it just seems very solid for a game, like
Yeah.
to like a very good idea to have something like that. And then I noticed just one thing is I saw in the trailer that you mentioned the new trailer where there was
Oh,
zombie
the second Skyward Sword?
yes, or
Yeah.
the second Breath of the Wild.
Oh yeah, Brother Blood. Yeah, yeah, that.
And I watched it after I had read about this like overworld thing, and you see Link and Zelda are underground, and you see like all this horrible stuff happening, and then it pans out like here's so first here's the underworld or a dungeon, and then you see the overworld after, like it pans out and shows like this relatively peaceful place with all this stuff going on underneath, and it's
Hmm.
just it's a little bit
Yeah,
interesting.
and right at the end, it's very subtly showing the castle rise with
Hmm.
this mist under it. It's just like, what's happening?
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, it's a very intriguing. It's a very intriguing prospect of what they're going to do with that game. Because if they go Majora's Mask Dark with it, people are going to love it. Because not so much for the time looping elements. That's why some people hated it. My brother stopped playing because he hated the looping, but um, th- but the going dark, people really appreciate a a kind of family friendly fun game going dark a little bit,
Right.
not going too far, but going dark enough to where you're like, oh wow, like
For sure.
this is like a kid's horror game, and it's like, and it works,
Yeah.
and it works. So, because like the there was like two really dark dungeons in Ocarina of Time, and I thought that went too far because the like this is where all the executed people were
Dude,
buried,
I thought
and
it was like crazy. Like I played it again recently, and just like the screaming that happens sometimes.
yeah, the
Ah!
Redead screaming to paralyze you, and it's like the stories behind those is just, and they're wearing wooden masks of their old face, or it's like, what the heck?
Jeez. Jeez.
Like, it's not entirely kid friendly, but it's vague enough to just be scary, and you don't know what the backstory is. The backstory just makes it like,
Yeah.
geez, like who came up with this? But it makes sense in context of the story. But it's just like you're so used to these fantasy um, kingdoms being so happy and benevolent that
Mhm.
you that this this is where the uh this is where the executed people go, like after when the royal family is is dissatisfied with them or something. Like there was
I love those.
some kind of like slimy underbelly of like, wait, what did the royal family have done with these people? They were, it's like, and these are the torture chambers. Like, who are they torturing? Why? What foreign country are you fighting with? Like the Gerudo are stuck in the middle of the desert by themselves. Who are you fighting?
Jeez.
Yeah, and so it's just like there's a lot of darkness going on over. That's why I brought up Undying Nephilim.
Oh,
And when he started making his story, all of this stuff kind of came to the surface, and I'm just like, now it makes sense, because what he's trying to do is like what I was talking about with Andrea is one person with a good vision making a thread from the beginning to the end. And he's trying to do that with The Legend of Zelda. It's just like, that's a tall ask, because you're talking about thousands of years of lore, and he made it into its own ages, and he actually has videos of, he made cutscenes of these old wars and these old stories and this stuff, and he actually made it like, you used to be able to play it when it was in a different game. I think it was in Total War or something, and then he ported it to a new game. I forgot what it's called, but the storyline is still the same, where you had all of these crazy old battles, and then it goes forward, and you've got this line of succession of the kings, and then you've got this line of knights and all this stuff, and you see Link, and he has a beard, and this is like, what's
so this
happening?
is a cutscene somebody made.
It's more than a cut. It's several cutscenes and half-hour videos, and like it really gets into all this stuff. And he's got 2 or 3 hour long podcasts where he's talking about these things and going into it. And he even brings up Pajot and going into symbolism and all these things. So he understands the culture
Right.
war stuff as well, and he's trying to get into deep symbolism. But I feel like he goes a little too deep with it. But that's just me. I'm not a very deep person. I try to keep things accessible to people.
Mm.
And what he's doing with this story is making it into a coherent timeline in which everything makes sense,
So
but still has the underlying story.
Mm.
But you get to a certain part where you played Twilight Princess, right?
Yes.
Okay, so you remember the Uka,
Uh,
the weird bird
like
headed, the human heads on bird body people.
human heads on bird body people.
Yeah,
I remember the.
they look like
Maybe.
weird little chicken people. It's
Oh yes,
freaky.
sort of.
Yeah. So imagine that, but they're actually extra dimensional beings who monitor time and try to keep everything ticking, and
I do remember those guys.
yeah, and they're like an ancient civilization, and they have and they're sick. It's kind of like a flood scenario. They're sick of the people and all their wars, and so they decided to just go down and wipe them all out.
Mm.
And then and in the middle of all of this stuff, this giant, like, it's kind of like the Library of Alexandria burning down. Suddenly this huge library that has all the repository of all of the knowledge and history of Hyrule and all of these stories is burnt down and is like flooded over with this water because this big cataclysm thing happened.
That's great.
And in the midst of that happening, their leader, or somebody asked their leader, but what about all the books? And he and their leader looks at this woman and just goes, why bother saving them? It's all lies. This is like, what? Like, all of that history and all of those books, it's all lies? Like, yeah, all of it. Like everything that you know about the history of Hyrule is wrong.
And so this is the story he makes to link it all together. No pun. I mean,
No, full pun intended, because Link is involved and his family is involved, and like and he's like the weird descendant of kings, and it's like, okay, does he take up the responsibility, or does he keep adventuring and saving people's lives? And it's just like,
mm,
what? And there's so many layers to this. They even bring in that weird unrequited love from Ocarina of Time between him and um Rido,
mm.
the
Farm Girl.
the Zora princess.
Oh, Zora. Yes.
Yeah, it's where they're like, there's clearly a history there, but you know, but he left her or something, and it's just like, what is going on here? I mean, like, I understand it and I approve like fully, because like there's clearly something deep going on here, and I want to figure out the dynamics going on of of okay, who does Link actually who does Link actually end up with, um and continue this line with, because a whole lot of it, like my my storytelling, it's why I can't stand all of these superheroes not having kids anymore. My storytelling is based off of linearity and a continued and a continued story, because it's like the Bible. You can trace lines of lineages and and going through all of the stuff. And so it's like, well, if these heroes stop having children and stop modeling that, well, it's like, it's no wonder people aren't having kids anymore. It's just like,
Well, I mean, yeah, yeah. That I think maybe probably people try to mess with ideas, and then maybe it doesn't feel right for them, or it doesn't like, or it.
well, I think they a lot of it was done wrong, like,
Okay. Okay.
because
What do you think?
they would do, I brought it up last time. I have a booklet where you can see some of these really obscure heroes that were brought up in some of the Fantastic Four comic books. And some of these obscure heroes and villains were sons and daughters of the of many other prominent heroes and villains. And some of them, and I think what they did wrong was that they didn't show any they didn't show any passage of time. Just suddenly this person comes out of nowhere, and they're their child,
Mm.
and and you're not sure what happened, or who the other parent is, or why they're attacking them, or what the angst is, or why they're helping, or where they come from. Like, there's no attachment between them, and it was all completely surface level, as it was just for shock. It's like, oh, it's a, here's this new character. It's like, oh, okay, I'm thoroughly shocked, but I
Mm.
have no interest. Because it doesn't make any sense and it doesn't go anywhere. And then all of these sub characters that have popped out of nowhere suddenly disappear into nowhere,
Man,
and you're not surprised.
man, man.
Yeah. And so having a lineage of Link, depending on where that goes, because there's many ideas going on in the symbolism of what's going on in what he's trying to do, because he's mixing it, he's taken a western setting, which is medieval and fantasy,
Hmm.
that is using eastern philosophy, which is cycles,
Hmm.
and then taking that and then stringing that into what I tend to call the straight spring, where it cycles but nothing is ever the same.
Mm.
And it, because that takes the cyclical thing into something that eventually ends but keeps moving forward, instead of seeming like it's the same thing all the time.
Okay, so the way I imagined it, so you have like a cycle, and on one, so it's link, link, and then you take the next one, and once it's like a different link and a different link or different, it's just like
Yeah.
new iterations in the same like same form, but it's filled with different things or new iteration on the same form.
Yeah, but instead of it being the way that the video games are laid out, where it's just link and link and link and link and link, it could be link and someone else and someone else and someone
Right.
else and someone else filling in the same spot, but
Hmm.
it's not link.
Hmm.
If you know what I'm saying. So
So so in the Legend of Zelda, there is times where it's like it's a it's Link or it's the hero or
yeah,
it's
because
some
if you look
guy.
at the stories of Link, they're all called Link, but each of them has a different hero name. They'll be called the Hero of Time, the Hero of Minish, the Heroes of the Four Swords. That kind of they'll call them a different hero, the Hero of Ages, the Hero of Seasons. They'll call them a different hero, even though they're all called Link.
Right.
And so every time they're referenced in a different game, suddenly there's this weird timeline thing going on. That's why in Wind Waker, they reference back to the Hero of Time, and in uh, Twilight Princess, the shade that you fight is the old dead warrior
Yes.
that is the Hero of Time.
Right. The hero.
And
Right.
he had grown up and he had become a knight, and he had become a part of the royal guard and all that stuff. And you see him as the dead shade with the one red eye. It's like, dude, that was Link.
That's
The
crazy.
Link you played in Ocarina of Time. That's him.
Jeez.
Yeah. And so there's
Oh
it's
man.
like
Wow.
all of suddenly these storylines that were nothing but this cycle have a linearity to them where they go forward. And it's
Hmm.
like, whoa, you mean there was actually a past to this, and it's not just the same thing over and over again.
Right.
And some people would say, oh, it's always been like that. It's like, no, not really, because they kept doing the same thing over and over again. Here, there's actually an unambiguous timeline, whereas just like I said with the beginning of it in Skyward Sword, where it's a generic hero killed banished demise, and that's kind of where this all started. And it's just like, okay, that's a good start, but everything else seems to be the same thing over and over again because of the curse.
Mm.
Well, you get to the Hero of Time and suddenly everything seems different because the Hero of Time is referenced.
Mm.
All the other stuff just says generic hero beats bad guy banished. In When it comes to the Hero of Time is constantly referenced. And
Right.
in the
He's
wind
referenced in later games. Yeah.
in later games, and in the Wind Waker, the
Why?
cycle is broken.
Okay.
And that's weird to me, but the cycle is broken somehow, because the the world at which the world that had been cursed, that kind of idea, I guess, had kind of sunk with Hyrule into the waters, and they had killed off Ganon once and for all. Period. It's done. There's no more cycle. Ganon's not coming back. That's the idea, and so it's just Link and Zelda. And so but there's always going to be evil. So there's always going to be something to fight against. It's just Ganon's done.
So
But
that's in the Wind Waker?
that's what happens in the Wind Waker. The cycle is broken in the Wind Waker, and then you go through the other kind of. Those are all the ones that were kind of done in that kind of toy style where he's got a big head.
Hmm.
Um, the
Those are the newer ones, right?
Yeah, those are some of the newer ones. Yeah, that came out with the GameCube and
Hmm.
the DS.
Yeah, like
Um,
Four Swords.
um, uh, I I I don't know, but the um, so with the Hero of Time, it's like if you were ever to say someone was Link, it's the hero of time. Period. Because that's where everything is solid. Ocarina of Time, if you looked at the whole timeline and went, okay, which one of these is most likely the true story? Ocarina of Time happened because it's referenced multiple times.
Okay.
That's how people do a lot of cross referencing for history of what is mentioned the most,
Right.
what has record,
Okay.
and what can cross reference. And the one thing that cross references is the hero of time. So that one happened.
Okay.
So building off of that
No, I can buy
seems
that. I can buy that.
seems to be the world that Undying Nephilim is creating, in which he has created a world in which the Ocarina of Time can happen and then did happen. But there's a dynamic there in which the events are not exactly what happened in the game. It's just that version of Link existed. And so you know that version of Link, who was the hero, who grew up, who was orphaned, whose mother took him from a war-torn area to the Deku Tree, who grew up with the Kokiri, who had all of this history with these people that he interacted with. That person existed. Even if any of the time travel things didn't happen. If none of the time travel happened, the rest of the adventure still happened. And so all of the sages and all of the people he knows are still there.
Oh.
So that's why he still has a relationship with Ruto. That's why he still has a relationship with Saria, and he still has a mentor in the kind of the Sage of Light, the Owly guy, and he's still a brother to Darunia, the Goron. It's all of these things. All of that is real, and then that moves forward, and they have the existential threats that come in every age, and that's the bad guy for the day.
Mm.
And then that moves forward regardless of whether or not Link is involved. Link's just the most famous hero.
Right. So, okay. So are you saying that the events in this timeline, in the games you played, like one objective thing could be the events that happened in Ocarina of Time?
Yes.
Okay. And then
the events dealing not with time travel.
Mhm.
Everything else happened. Or at least versions of them happened, to the degree where he grew up knowing all these people and having relationships with them.
Right.
The rest of it is tales and adventures involving heroes and villains, and none of them are exactly the person that they say they are. They are just the projection put onto that story, because it's like telling multiple stories about Hercules.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, he's involved in this story and this story and this story and this story. It's like, yeah, but none of these ones happen. Yeah, but here's his story. We just put him in these ones because he's the generic hero that can do all of this stuff because he's really strong.
Okay, so why wouldn't the time travel had happened?
Because in context of the story, time ticks forward. So there can be manipulation, but it would always be ticking forward. The Uka, the ones that are kind of making sure that happens, would probably prevent reverse time travel. You might be able to go forward, or you might be able to slow things down a little bit, but that's still going forward.
Okay, so this is in the timeline where you've made it all work.
No, this is in the timeline that Undying Nephilim made it all work.
Okay. Okay.
I don't know any of this for certain. It just seems like this is what's
Mm,
going on
mm,
because I'm seeing no time travel, none,
mm.
in what's going on in his story. It's all ticking forward. So even if time travel is possible, it doesn't seem like it would be an aspect.
Mm.
Like
It
it
is
doesn't.
crazy to think about.
Yeah, yeah. It's like imagine um, imagine having a limit to it's like combustion engines. You can only do so much with a combustion engine, and eventually you get to the point where you're putting so many cylinders in a line and you're not getting anything more out of it.
Mm.
And imagine doing that with time, where you can go a little bit faster or a little bit slower, but it's always going to go in one direction. You can't go backwards.
Yeah.
So there's a hard limit, um, because there would be a huge break, and the Uka would not put up with that.
Okay. So when Link, so all right, so young Link goes through his adventures and the people he knows. So is it basically saying that the things that weren't the adventure in the Ocarina of Time happen? Like there's a historical link.
Here's the adventure that would have happened is Link uh, going through his adventure to the point at which there he's in the garden with Zelda, where she's telling him that she had a really bad feeling about this guy who's meeting with the king, and
And how
then
far? When was that?
that was near the beginning of Ocarina of Time,
Okay.
and so
Oh,
you've got to
that's when you
go.
do the Romeo and Juliet like creep into the garden, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. I didn't see that connection, but now I do. Thank you for that. But yeah, it's very much like that. And then the only person that sees you is her personal bodyguard, Impa.
Mm.
But the who herself is a ninja, which I
Is it
would.
wait, was that her, so that was her uh role model, that was who inspired her to be chic
Yes.
almost? Okay.
Yeah, she
Okay.
trained her in the in in the in the Sheikah ways.
That's freaking nuts. That's cool.
Yeah, yeah. So she taught her to be invisible and to hide in plain sight, and because she's the princess, she cannot be captured. That's a
Didn't know
bad idea. So um that's one of the few games at which Zelda isn't captured until like the end.
that. Mm,
Because it's only later on when Ganondorf finds her and then puts her in a crystal or whatever, which is a very constant theme since I think the uh, Link to the Past.
mm.
She's put in a crystal because the maidens were all put in a crystal that you had to go save.
Could that be something like Ganon? So Ganon's like a tyrant trying to put a restraint on like something like feminine, something that's supposed to
Yeah,
be.
he is a tyrant. He is overbearing control,
Mm,
and that causes stagnation and decay. You see that in the town itself, where it just
mm.
falls apart and there's nothing but redeads in the town.
Yeah, and
So
in the zombie Ganon for more recently, yeah.
yeah, and so I'm the way I hope that they're going with that with the zombie Ganon is that it's the aspect that was outside of him is the darkness, and the aspect that's being kept alive in the zombie wants to die
Hmm.
and doesn't want this anymore and like wants to move on because
Hmm.
I prefer the storylines that moves forward, but that's just me. But the so the storyline would have gotten to the point where they're in the garden together, and instead of um, instead of this wacky time travel thing going on, it would have been um, the king listens to his daughter's warnings about her dreams. And you see that in this storyline where the Zelda that is in these cutscenes that Nephilim put together has visions. Like you can see her eyes glowing, like, and she doesn't know what's going on. So she's a bit of an oracle, and so she's trying to figure out what's happening. And so it's that timeline where she has visions where her father or her mother would have listened to her dreams and said, "Yeah, we need to not deal with this guy." And so Ganon doesn't get into the usurper position, and instead he tries to muster an army and then attacks them and fails.
Hmm.
And then it moves forward from that.
Okay.
And that's kind of a baseline idea for a what if scenario based off of what I know of Ocarina of Time itself and of um, and of Neff's story,
Hmm.
where it would continue on as him as a kid. That's Majora's Mask, and so that and Majora's Mask technically happened. The thing that the problem with Majora's Mask a lot of people have is that it seems like it's a weird death state.
Majora's Mask. Mm.
Majora's Mask, a lot of people say, "Oh, he's in a kind of a limbo and he's trying to break out of it," because
What I
there's a
heard.
lot of everything in that game has to do with death and moving on and passing on and healing and
Mm.
grieving, and there's a lot of these things. And um but I I I honestly I don't know if I agree with that, because while there's
Yeah.
mirroring aspects and certain people look like other people and they have like the same names and all that, I think that's just because of the game mechanics. But that's not the way that Neff is treating them. The way Neff
Oh,
is treating them is that Majora's Mask is a limbo or a death state.
yes, and I think that one is definitely more. I heard that one, and that one is definitely more interesting to me, or it is interesting. Just like it makes it much more. Like there's times in the game where like if you didn't know that, like it's like kind of sad, but also there's times where he's like okay, so when the time starts to when the song starts to speed up after the days goes on, once like more days go on, right?
Yeah, time speeds up every day.
Yeah, yeah, and it sort of starts to feel like manic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like oh my god, like we're moving at 100
and
miles
and
per
that's
hour.
because Majora is a chaos god
Mm-hmm.
who
Mm,
who
mm,
who was summoned and then banished into a mask.
mm,
Who
mm.
tried to do this before? He tried to kill the world before like this because
Okay,
he just thought it was fun,
okay,
and
that's
he's pure madness.
yeah, yeah, and it definitely okay. So that I mean, given that there's is a like theology there, like
Mm-hmm.
it does make it seem a little less likely that it's just Link's afterlife. You know what I mean? Because that if it was Link's afterlife or a limbo, you would think it would just be like inside Link's head.
Well, and that's see what I would imagine it being is that they're both true, but
Mm-hmm.
it's Link in a near death experience, because what happens at the beginning is that the Skull Kid steals his stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and then Link chases him through the forest and down this hole, and there's a Alice in Wonderland sequence where he's falling through and he's seeing all these symbols and weird stuff's going on. So the way I imagine it is he fell into a hole and knocked his head, and this is his this is his illusion going on,
Mm.
and and him and him going through all this stuff and ultimately winning is him healing.
Yeah, yeah,
And and while at the same time Majuro is real, So and it's trying to get in through his head.
Mm,
And
So
so
that's the so in your idea, like that's the opening for Majora when Link's having a like when he's damaged for a second.
when he falls into the pit, that's him getting injured and hallucinating all of that happening, and then him winning is healing. But Majuro real, and he's trying to manifest in the
Mm,
world, and that's a bad thing
mm.
because as as a chaos god, he's tried to do this stuff before, and he really is trapped in a mask. And the idea the idea moving forward with that is that it failed, and he got through that, but he remembers all of it.
Right.
And so he's got that and the scar of it, and he would move forward as a little bit tougher. Like, he's been through a lot already, but he would be a little bit tougher, like, and understanding what real darkness looks like.
So it's a trial almost.
Yes.
That's what you see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Where like the Ballad of the Windfish in Wind Waker, not Wind Waker. Shoot, what is that? In Link's Awakening. In Link's Awakening, that is this a similar thing happens, but it's less. But it's more obvious because they tell you it's a dream. Because in Link's Awakening, he's sailing in a storm, and his boat gets struck by lightning, and then after all of the events of the game, he wakes up on driftwood, and the only thing that was real of it, depending on how you play the game, if you like 100% the game or don't die in the game, one of the characters from your dream, it from the windfish, which is the only thing that's actually real, is the windfish, because it's sleeping, and it's this giant whale. It's like it's that whale god that people say in some pantheons. Is I can't remember where it comes from, but the it's a whale with wings instead of fins, and it's the island that he washes up on is the dream of the windfish, and so he has to wake the windfish up, and then he wakes up, and the only one that escapes from this is Marin, who leaves who leaves as the windfish heard her number one wish, which is she wanted to become a seagull and see the world. And so she flies away as a seagull at the end of the game. And it's extremely heart-wrenching because like there's this like love story going on between Link and Marin through the whole thing. And like it's just like with Rudo, where he has no idea what's going on. And he's just like really awkward through the whole thing. So
So
it
Link has this whole romance that he's unawares of.
yeah, in a dream, that and with someone who is completely fake, who gets born into the world as a seagull and just goes off and sees the world. Well, and it's like it's beautiful, but at the same time it's kind of like, okay, that's weird. But these are trials that he's gone through, is as in hit it's so that's evidence for this kind of stuff happening before, of he's been injured before and lived through a dream like this, because him suddenly being teleported into an alternate dimension that just happens to have the same people he's seen before seems like a little bit of a far fetch, because alternate dimensions doesn't seem like that much of a thing. There's um there's planes, kind of like there's a realm of the sages, and a realm of this and a realm of that, but a whole dimension that has like people living their lives and doing all of this stuff.
Right.
It outside of being banished isn't really that much of a thing in The Legend of Zelda, because if you look through Twilight Princess, the people that live in the Twilight were a banished tribe. They were banished. That plane of existence is not meant to be lived in.
Right. In which one?
in Twilight Princess.
Okay. Okay.
And then people started drawing parallels because at the beginning of Majora's Mask, it starts talking about these this tribe that worshipped Majuro and summoned him and he ended up being put into this mask because he was
Okay.
banished into it. And every time you wear the mask, he starts entering back into the world. And the the suddenly you hear the story about this banished tribe and these dark people and in this twilight realm. It's like, this is the banished tribe that summoned Majuro. It's like, okay, so clearly Ocarina of Time happened.
Mhm.
The events, at least leading to the lore of Majora's Mask, happened. And Twilight Princess, in some aspect, at least involving the banned tribe, happened. So there's clear blocks of things that happened, and that's why he picked them out in these in this game he's making, this story where these things clearly happened.
Okay.
And the person telling you the story through his narration, um, from the very beginning, you recognize the voice because it's Midna talking in her strange backwards speech,
Mm.
and she's narrating all of the ages and what's going on,
In
and it's the
his
story being told
okay.
through.
Okay. So this is in his so Nephilims?
In Undying Nephilim's storyline, it's it's uh it's the story, it's the story of the past, of the true past,
Mm.
being told by Midna.
Mm. Mm.
um and so you're wondering, like, okay, so clearly present day, as far as that world goes, is something akin to Twilight Princess, because
Mm.
that's where the story is being told from.
Okay. Maybe I can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So and that brings even more questions, because at the end of Twilight Princess, she severed the link between the two worlds, and by shattering the mirror. And so it's just like, okay, so then how does she know all this? Because and there was another dynamic between her and Link, and there's so many fantastic questions that could spring up from just from just hearing who's narrating this stuff that she shouldn't know.
Hmm. Hmm. Dude.
Yeah, it's insane, like what the breadth of this project, and he's been working on it for such a long time. I think maybe 2015.
Mm.
He's
Mm.
been working on it for a very long time, and that's only the I think that's only the game part. I think he's been working on the story and trying to hash it out. And he's even gone back and kind of changed some aspects of some of the past parts to try to try to make it all one coherent thing that that feeds into what he's trying to do with symbolism, because he's
Okay.
so steeped in symbolism, to the degree where there is a point at which you see Majuro in the mask as this person in a robe talking to the head Uka guy that failed, and him being extremely cryptic and laughing at him. It's just like, okay, this is getting creepy. It's really great. It's absolutely fantastic. I cannot wait until he's done, because it's going to be huge.
So he's trying to basically so he's basically trying to find the events that actually happened because they're referenced in he's
He
basically like
he's
trying to find what he thinks were events that actually happened in
he's making the most logical through line happen.
Mm.
That's what he's doing. Like I don't know if I don't know if he's thought fully through of what is historically referenced. I think he's taking what is most solid
Mm.
in storytelling. Like it's no wonder why he would start in an area where you would see not middle aged, kind of young adult Link, maybe in his 20s, with a beard, who is a who is a talented soldier, but still is a little bit cocky.
Mm.
It makes sense why you would start in there, because the game that started it all out, that had the most story like in it, told through the creation story, was Ocarina of Time, because they told you what happened with the three goddesses and the Triforce and all of that stuff. Everything was laid out. It's like, well, yeah, that's where you would start. You would start
Totally.
from the point of action at which you are with the most familiar hero,
Mm.
and then you would kind of tell the backstory, which is when you get into the old kings and the
Okay.
golden age, and that's where that's other stories that he's telling.
Okay. Okay.
And he even made those into some levels that you could play through and fight the old battles between the original Ganon, which was the big pig monster guy, who tried to invade because he wanted more, he wanted to save his people, and they needed more resources, and people wouldn't deal with them, and so finally he just decided to attack. And so it starts this big line of resentment, which is like clearly the through line for the curse. It's just like, it's not really a curse, it's just like they've got a grudge.
Mm.
Like, here's a historical grudge. Like, okay,
Mm.
that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's that's I actually heard my uh um brother and sister when I went in, so I had to grab the charger or a charger, and they were talking about human nature, uh whether we're evil or good, and my brother took the position of we're bad by nature, and my sister took the Rousseauian perspective. And
Mm.
I was just walking through, and I heard him talking about that, and then uh, I was like, I just like real quick, I was like, well, we have potential for both, and I was about to walk out, and my brother's like, well, why do people do evil things then? And the answer that popped in my head, and I didn't say it, it was just resentment, like
Yeah.
undealt with, like because I wanted to sort of give the answer
Mm.
like that was the most solid
It,
answer my mind could come up
it's 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 a feeling of injustice, and and when you pull in aspects of Christianity, it starts to explain the balance of justice and mercy, where if if you got justice, someone's going to get hurt.
with.
Period. Like, there's a lot of suffering in justice. Justice is painful because it goes back and it sees what somebody did wrong. It exposes that, and then it punishes that. That's justice. Where you balance with mercy is, okay, we've exposed this wrong, and we want to punish this, but we're going to let you heal.
Right.
And it's like, where does that come from? And it doesn't feel right initially.
Mm.
It feels unjust. If you let a murderer go, suddenly everyone freaks out. And it's just like, he could kill again. It's like, well, statistically, murderers don't actually do that. They
Mm.
kill once and then freak out for the rest of their lives that they took someone's life. It's it, it's like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. It.
really really hard to deal with mercy. Mercy is very, very difficult.
Well, I feel like people, like my experience is there's an extent to which, like, if somebody does something you think is wrong, like there's an amount. Yeah, people do have an issue with mercy.
Hmm.
And I guess being a good, like, I'm thinking of being a good father in life is just like, towards, I guess, a father in a community, a father of the community is, or something like that. It's like being, it's like the harsh element of reality will hit you before it kills you. Like, and that's, I think,
Hopefully.
right, right. And that would be like,
That would be a proper hero's journey
right,
of
right. And that would be the,
reality hitting you before your demise. That's a comedy. That's not a tragedy. A tragedy is
right,
it hits you before you figure it out.
right, right. And that's, I think there's an element of mercy in that, and people have a problem with mercy going beyond that. Like, oh, you don't have to, like, the the murderer being let off, I guess.
Yeah. There's a book called Too Angry to Die or something like that.
Mm,
And
shit.
it's a story about a um or Too Nasty to Die, something like that. But it's a story about a guy that was a gangster, and he went to jail, and he did a whole bunch of bad stuff, and eventually he got saved. And then when he got out of jail, he um, he started doing ministry and stuff, and he felt called to go back into jail. It's like, well, what's going on? And so he started to do ministry inside of jails and talking to people, and then he noticed a pattern. Is that is that um, they would ask for forgiveness, and they would get prayed for, and they would go through all of this stuff, and then they would go through a little group project where they had to write out everything bad that was done to them. And then when they were done, they didn't have to go to, they couldn't go anywhere, but they had to think of each of the people that had wronged them and forgive them.
Mm.
And
Mentally.
they wouldn't do it. A lot of them would not do it. They were like, "Oh,
Mm.
no, you don't know what they did to me. You don't know what they."
Oh,
It's like, okay, but if you don't forgive, you won't be forgiven. That's kind of a thing, and it's it's noticed. He noticed that pattern of some of the guys that were the worst off had no forgiveness.
mm,
Like, they would not let things go at all.
mm,
And it made sense why they kept getting back into prison over and over again.
man.
And
Yeah,
because everything was done to them, they couldn't let it go. They couldn't forgive.
it's
And so
true.
it just made sense to him at that point. It's just like, man, now I know why people are evil. they
Yeah.
can't you can't they can't they can't have mercy. It's like, man,
That's
I never want to be in that position.
that's a discovery, and it's even more of a discovery that, like, the conclusion isn't people are evil because people did bad things to them. It's people are evil because they can't forgive.
Hmm.
Like, that's there's more power there. Like, that's,
Yeah.
you have more power there. Like, you can do something.
Hmm.
Um,
Well, and in context of these games, Ganon could have stopped it at any time
yeah.
because he was the driving force. Everything else was an answer to him. at any point in any of these stories, if he would have just said, "No, I'm not attacking anybody. I'm 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 not giving into this." At any time, it would have broken the cycle.
He
But he
wouldn't have
didn't.
been in. Yeah, I mean, yes, he could have, but then I think of how Mercury mentions, and something I've thought about is like he is this one, like he is power amalgamated into one thing.
Yeah, and he gets the Triforce of Power, which makes
Mhm.
him even more
Megalomaniacal.
that.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay, yeah, that was a
yeah.
little, yeah.
He becomes a megalomaniac,
Hmm.
even more so. So because he was already a sorcerer. Because you see the stuff that he does without the Triforce beforehand. He gets this energy ball and he blasts Link with it, just to be a jerk. And the um,
Wait, was that when he was a kid?
yeah, when Link was a kid and he watched Ganondorf chase
Right.
chase Zelda out with Impa,
Away.
and he said, "Kid, where you saw another horse come out here? Like, where did it go?" And Link's basically a mute, so he doesn't say anything, and
Uh,
uh, so he does, and he's like, "Okay, fine," and he just blasts him. Just it's like, well, you're not helping me out. I'm gonna be a jerk to you. I was like, okay, yeah. So and that's another thing that you'll notice if you go through the Nephilim stories is Link talks, and the first time you hear him talk, it's just kind of like, okay, because it's the mouth moving, text is being produced thing. There's no voices, unlike Breath of the Wild, but so he actually interacts with the world, and you see the hero in him, but you also see the hero's faults of being cocky,
hmm.
of being of like, I'm the hero,
Like
I
jumping
win.
into danger.
Like,
Right.
I always win. Like, that's the way he thinks heroism works. It's like he doesn't worry too much because
Right.
he's always won.
Right.
And so when he gets knocked down, it freaks him out every time.
Mm.
It's like, how did I lose? Like,
How am I
what's
still?
going on? And that dynamic doesn't go away until he loses a lot.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
And
Yeah.
so that's like the dark side of courage. You can have a like the because the way that they're depicted is they've got the Triforce of Courage, the Triforce of Power, the Triforce of Wisdom. Well, the dark side of wisdom is that you can become haughty and think that you know better than other people, and treat yourself like a bit of a messiah figure.
Mm.
Well, that's what happens to one of the lines of Zelda's, because that's one of the things that he keeps is some of the names repeat, and there's been more than one um, Princess Zelda, and so it's like Zelda the Third, kind of because it's a royal line. So that's kind of expected, and because Link's father's name was like Gustav or something. Um, the the the
Gustav.
the old Zelda, I think Zelda this second,
Mm.
or I don't know, one of the older Zeldas, one of the more ancient ones, one of the more powerful ones, became what was known as um, the false goddess. So people call her Hylia, even though she's the aspect of Hylia. They think she's Hylia herself. It's like, that's not true.
Mm.
She
Mm.
so she and she loses her sight, and so she's blind, and she's on this floating golden throne, and the Wizrobes venerate her, and so she's got these sycophants who are extremely powerful wizards, and it's just like, okay, something's up here. And that's the dark side of wisdom, is that you can get to you can get too full of that,
Right.
and think that you know better. You might know better, but you think that you can use that knowledge um, to benefit yourself instead of others. And the dark aspect of courage that comes out in Link is that he is overconfident, whereas you would normally see. I think you turned your mic off.
Yeah, for a second. Yeah.
Yes, you would see normally in the games as he's being courageous, even a little bit naively courageous.
Yes, that's one thing I've always associated with Link was being very sprightly in
Mhm.
his courage, very like even in the heat of battle he's like positive and like
He's
uh
a wide-eyed kid with a sword
right,
through
and that
most of the
ends up
stories.
he ends
Yeah.
up plunging himself into uh danger with a like a uh looking at the silver lining.
Yeah. But Ocarina of Time is the first time you see him like as an adult.
Mm, mm,
And so that aspect of him moving into him being an adult, you lose the innocence.
mm.
And so now he's not naive, he's foolish.
Right, and it ends up like it's probably that's why it's so surprising when Ganon just shoots him and he ends up falling.
Mhm.
How did I end up here?
Yeah, it's just like, oh, like on one hand, like, okay, I got zapped, like that was, that hurt. On the other hand, how am I still alive?
Mm,
Because it's like you expect somebody to get zapped with like lightning or some kind of whatever that power beam was. That it's like stuff like that just seems extremely powerful. You expect people to be charred, but it was just like a force push or something, and like, you little bug, get away from me. um but the the you
okay.
almost never see the light side of power in Ganon.
Mm, mm,
And so you can see the light and the dark side of courage and the light and the dark side of wisdom, but you almost never see the light side of power in Ganon.
right,
So
right.
it's like, how do you positively depict power? Well, it's hard to do that without a king, and usually the king in these stories is gone.
Right. Okay, so as far as just time goes,
Mhm.
um I probably got like maybe just like wrap up here like
Oh yeah,
in a second.
I thought you meant time in the games. I was like,
Dude,
wait,
it really is so interesting. Like
yeah,
if you want to like yeah, I'm game whenever like if you want to talk more later, definitely.
yeah. I will see if I can put together um, a playlist
Okay.
of Neff's storyline,
Okay.
because he's got podcasts. The podcasts are like 2 or 3 hours a piece,
Mm,
um, where he kind of explains this stuff. But if you just wanted to, I don't know, enjoy the entertainment of his storyline,
mhm.
I'll put a not a pod, I'll put a playlist together and see if I can get that into a coherent narrative, because he's very spotty with some of the information, and I don't know which ones are in what order, so I've got to watch them all and put them together like
Okay.
that.
Okay. For sure. For sure. Dude, it's been really good talking to you, man. Like
Yeah.
yeah, I definitely uh have better knowledge of the Zelda timelines at least and Morrowind and the yeah, yeah, and music and games. I could definitely talk to you like if you want to talk more about music and games.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
Bring uh, bring in some examples, and we can go over those next time. And
okay, for
like
sure.
when you come across something, like jot it down, and we'll go through that. Oh, I've got an idea
Okay.
of for the for the for the Neff storyline. We could do like Mercury's watch parties, and
Okay,
yeah, yeah,
dude. Yeah.
yeah, and we can kind of record our reaction, because I don't think he would be offended with us recording that,
No.
um, with the analyses.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And then yeah, yeah, I'll definitely like come up with I'll come up with like at least maybe like 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 like samples of music in games, just like, and we
Hmm.
can look at them,
Yeah,
like pick them
yeah,
apart.
and if you find anything that I didn't cover, so
Hmm.
like if I didn't cover it, it's probably because I don't know about it. So
Right.
bring it up. Like if there's more examples of types,
Right.
like
Types of music.
yeah,
Yeah,
like I'd
totally.
I'd love to hear it.
Dude, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure. For sure. Dude, I will try and find that.
man. So how I. I can't wait to figure out how long this recording is, because I don't even remember when we started.